You hear the SAVE Act passed? This is one of the big ones, folks. This is one of the big we no longer have a democracy type moves. Passed through the House, I should say. I'm sorry, to clarify, it passed through the House. It has not made its way through the Senate, has not been signed by the president, but it did make its way through the House. With 4 Democrats. Thank you, Democrats. Is this the one that would keep a huge swath of women from being able to vote? Yeah, that seems to be the intention, basically. Remember how, though it's still legally pending, there was that effort in North Carolina to send back 60,000 votes, so people had 2 weeks to, like, confirm their ability to vote, and a lot of the votes that got sent back were because of discrepancies like a name change, but the name change was women changing their last names because they had married a man. So there was a discrepancy there. But keep in mind, the discrepancy there wasn't one that actually, like, confused the system or made it difficult to determine whether they were registered to vote. Like, there are voter registration profiles that are a little bit more robust than being confused by something like, oh, your name used to be, like, Elizabeth Smith and now it's Elizabeth, Johnson or whatever. But now, it seems like they're going to try to apply that nationwide. Approve legislation requiring documentary proof of U.S. citizenship for anyone registering to vote, something voting rights groups have warned could disenfranchise millions of Americans. Don't they use SSN to confirm identity, not just your name? Yeah, when you register to vote, like, you register with your social security number. There's a whole profile, like, that goes into it. It's a whole thing, If it becomes the law, the SAVE Act would take effect immediately and apply to all voter registration applications. This has no impact on individuals that are currently registered to vote, said Rep. Brian Stell, a Wisconsin Republican who's been advocating for the bill. Well, if you move, you need to re-register because your registration is tied to your address. People get deregistered randomly by Republicans all the time. Voting rights groups say there's more to the story. The law would affect voters who already are registered if they move, change their name, or otherwise need to update their registration. This was acknowledged to some extent by the bill's author, Chip Roy, during a recent hearing on the legislation. Let me get that up. Chip Roy SAVE Act. Here, this was right ahead of the vote.
I want to thank the chairman for his strong work and commitment to election integrity and to working with us on this bill, in particular, the SAVE Act. He's done an extraordinary job, and I'm proud to work with him and work with the rest of my colleagues on it. I'm proud to work with my friend Cleta Mitchell, who had a significant hand in what we were doing here. I'm quite certain that she is pretty well aware of protecting the right of females to be able to vote, along with my friends Stephanie Bice and Mary Miller and Laurel Lee, and Lauren Boebert, and Kat Kamak, all of whom came down to the floor in full support of this legislation because they know the truth. They know the truth that the American people know, which is that as much as my colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to bring up the DMV, the American people know that the DMV is very good at giving driver's license to illegal aliens because we know it to be true.
But having a driver's license doesn't mean you're registered to vote. That's not what that means. If you show up and you vote and you give them the ballot and then they input it, and there's no profile associated with you as a registered citizen who's registered to vote, the vote is tossed out. Having a driver's license doesn't mean your vote is considered valid.
We know that there are people who have been indicted for voting illegally. We know that there are
most of whom are Republican.
Voter rolls with massive numbers of people who are illegally present in the United States. We know that the previous
just not true
administration let in millions of people into the United States wrongfully and illegally under parole and asylum, blatantly abusing the law to put people in the United States that have no basis for being here, many of whom carried out dangerous acts against American people, killed American citizens, but importantly, have been registering to vote.
Just not true, but it doesn't fucking matter, right? Like, there have been so many efforts to find pockets of voter fraud, and nothing ever comes up, ever. When voter fraud happens, 99% of the time, it's because the person who put forward a vote made a mistake. Like literally, like they filed in error. Like there's some issue they didn't re-register after changing address or whatever. That kind of thing, It's not a coordinated effort to subvert votes. Even the Trump administration, after his first presidential win, tried to find evidence that 3 million illegals voted, a claim that he made after winning, and they couldn't.
That's what's been happening. So what we understand is the American people have spoken very clearly that they believe only American citizens should vote in American elections. There's nothing controversial about that.
Which is already the law. This is already the law. It's already in the books. This is already the case. Voter fraud is already illegal.
There's nothing controversial about saying that you should be able to ensure that only citizens vote.
Which is why it's already the case.
And let's be very clear. Federal law has currently been interpreted to prohibit states from being able to check citizenship.
This is incorrect. The voter registration profile is checked when the ballot is submitted. The thing that is not lawful, unless the SAVE Act gets passed and signed into law, is making people prove citizenship when they vote or when they register to vote, depending on the specifics. But even if you register to vote and you're not a legal citizen, do you know what happens? Nothing. Nothing happens because there's no valid profile to check that application against. When you register to vote, you're filling out a form and you're saying, yeah, you know that citizen with a social security number, that person who has the ability to vote? I'm that person, and this is my registration form so that I may vote in the near future. So if you submit that registration and then they check it back and there's no back end citizen data to validate it, they're like, oh, this is worthless, and they chuck it in the fireplace. The point is to reduce the number of left-leaning voters. Overwhelmingly, this is about disenfranchising people at will, by the way, because there are literally, every year, millions of people who vote without having done the proper, oh, well, my name changed, so I'm going to re-register my voter profile with my name change or whatever. All meaningless, by the way, harmless, because it's all checked against the backlog of social security numbers. But they want to be able to selectively deregister people, largely women. They will disenfranchise their own rural voters too. It doesn't matter. If they statistically disenfranchise more women than men, that would be enough to turn some states red.
That's the truth. That's why the state of Arizona, for example, has two systems. One for state and local, one for federal.
When he speaks, the gentleman's continued to recognize.
The good people of Arizona have two systems in place. They check for citizenship for state and local elections, and they're unable to check for citizenship in federal elections. The point of this bill is to ensure that we guarantee only citizens vote by allowing those states to be able to check, by having systems, federal systems, be open to the states to be able to check, and to require proof of citizenship when you register. There's nothing complex about that. There's nothing more sacred under the Constitution than ensuring that the people are able to have the voice in the election of the people that represent them in Washington and throughout the country. Once that is undermined, then people lose faith in the very institutions upon which this is built. This legislation is designed to restore that faith, to save our elections, to save...
Of course, even if they get this passed, by the way, they are still going to complain about voter fraud nonstop all the time, obviously. When people, they're going to cite deregistered voters because married women didn't change their names right or something. They're going to cite them as examples of billions of illegal immigrants trying to rig the election that we can now finally identify because of this new law.
Election integrity. I'm proud to have worked on this bill with my friend, the chairman, with my colleagues on this side of the aisle. And I would note that 5 of my Democrat colleagues joined us last summer to vote for this bill. Hardly a partisan exercise. Hardly a partisan exercise to say that we should protect the elections of the American people.
Thanks.
So I urge my colleagues to support this bill.
The SAVE Act compels states to reject any voter registration application in which the applicant has not presented, quote, documentary proof of U.S. citizenship. Among the acceptable documents for demonstrating proof of citizenship are a Real ID compliant driver's license that, quote, indicates the person is a citizen, a valid U.S. passport, a military ID card with a military record of service that lists the applicant's birthplace as in the U.S., a valid government-issued photo ID that shows the applicant's birthplace was in the U.S., or a valid government-issued ID presented with documents such as certified birth certificate that shows birthplace was in the U.S. Blah. But how will they disenfranchise single women? This is how they get away with it, okay? The point of laws like this is you have a fundamental right, which is voting, right? Pretty important in a democracy. The point of laws like this are to put more and more barriers, minor barriers. It's not like the SAVE Act would prevent me from getting registered or voting. Maybe it would take like 5 more seconds if I ever need to re-register to vote for me to make sure the documents are blah, 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 blah. But the important things are, it's an unnecessary step. It solves nothing. This solves no problems. Again, all voter registrations are already checked against a backlog of citizens who are eligible to vote. You can't just submit a voter registration with no underlying social security number for like, that doesn't work that way. So nothing is solved here. But it creates one more teeny, tiny, minuscule little hurdle. But a minuscule little hurdle, when multiplied against the entire population of the United States, is a lot of people. Lots of people stopped shopping at places like Walmart because a dude asks you for your receipt before you leave. That Dana, exactly. A perfect illustration of the point. Perfect illustration of the point. People are turned away from their something they might otherwise do, often by the tiniest of inconveniences. And I can say personally, as somebody who is pretty responsible with keeping his documents together, there have been times where I have like delayed significantly in doing something, largely because there was some just tiny inconvenience, some little thing. Oh, I needed to bring a passport for that. Well, I have a passport and I have it at home, but I forgot to bring it with me. I have my ID. Is that enough? No? Okay, passport thing. 3 months later, I still haven't gotten it done. Why? Because I've got other stuff going on in my life. Now, I place a high value on the ability to vote, right? Like generally as a moral, good. A lot of people don't. One of the reasons why people are so, I guess, like voter participation is not great in this country. Apathy kind of weighs down on everyone, A lot of people vote only out of the most marginal of convenience. Like if things were even a little bit more inconvenient, they'd be like, yeah, and they just wouldn't do it that day, That's why Voter Day is not a national holiday, because if it was, more people would vote. That's why we don't just automatically register citizens who are 18 years old to vote. You have to submit a voter registration, which makes no sense. Why wouldn't you just auto-register a citizen? Why do you have to register? Most countries auto-register you if you're a citizen and you're 18. Why would you have to submit a form? You're only submitting a form to tell the government that you're ready to have the right that you were already given by virtue of being a citizen and being 18 years old. How cooked are international students? You mean like people who are abroad who would submit their votes as like a foreign? I'm sure this would be like an inconvenience. I don't think they already go through a lot of inconvenience, frankly, to vote. So I don't know how much more it would be on top of that, to be honest. What if my driver's license doesn't list my birthplace or indicate I'm a U.S. citizen? Even many that are Real ID compliant don't do this. A driver's license alone will probably not indicate U.S. citizenship. That's what Real ID shows. No, it just says right here, even Real ID compliant driver's licenses do not necessarily prove that you are a citizen. So carry your passport. I mean, that's what's on offer for most Americans, right? When you register to vote. So a driver's license probably won't indicate that you're a citizen, depending on the state that you're in, the state from which it's issued. Most people don't have a military ID card. A valid government-issued photo ID that shows the applicant's birthplace was in the U.S. Okay, sure, those exist. Kind of depends on the state, and what people tend to go for. And then a lot of people don't have passports. You guys aren't going to believe this, but we also aren't given passports by default in the United States. You have to file for them, and there's a cost involved, and it takes time. So if you want to register to vote and your state's ID doesn't indicate citizenship, you don't have a passport, as is the case for like half of Americans, you're not a military, you're not a service member, I guess you're up to a generic government-issued photo ID proving that your birthplace was in the U.S. Do you see the issue now? I mean, it's not impossible to get around, but I bet you a lot of people are going to change their names or move and re-register and have their voter registration denied because they didn't provide these documents, because they don't have these documents, and then they're just not going to be registered. They might not even know. What about people who got their citizenship but weren't born in the U.S.? Great question. Odds this law gets struck down as unconstitutional? 0. Voting rights groups say the list of documents doesn't consider the realities facing millions of Americans who do not have easy access to their birth certificates and the roughly half who don't have a passport. They also worry about additional hurdles for women whose birth certificates don't match their current IDs because they changed their last name after getting married. That's another big one. There were many examples of this during local elections last month in New Hampshire, which recently implemented a proof of citizenship requirement for voting. Yup. Because again, you might get a new driver's license in accordance with your new name post-marriage. Are you getting a new passport? Because that's, how many people be doing that? New Hampshire town elections offer a preview of citizenship voting rules being considered nationwide. Here we go. We've got a test. 2 voters were not able to participate in recent town elections thanks to a new state law requiring proof of U.S. citizenship to register to vote. Their experiences, recounted by town clerks, could prove instructive for the rest of the country as the SAVE Act advances in Congress and more than a dozen states consider similar legislation. New passports are extremely easy to get and not at all a hassle, guys. I think you're being sarcastic, but just keep in mind, even if getting a new passport wasn't a hassle at all, which it kind of is, keep in mind, every impediment is like they all add up. That is the point. Like even leaving aside the money, even if it was easy and free, every impediment stacks up, but it's not easy and it's not free. Voting rights groups are particularly concerned that married women who have changed their names will encounter trouble when trying to register because their birth certificates list their maiden names. That is exactly what happened to Brooke Young, a 45-year-old hairstylist who showed up at her polling place in Derry last week determined to show her support for public education. She was turned away initially because she did not have proof of citizenship. When she returned with her birth certificate, that's such a big document to bring out. You go to a polling place, you wait in line, you get to the front, got to come back with your birth certificate. And are they being asked to provide this proof for voting? Not just for registering to vote, but for voting? When she returned with her birth certificate, that was still not enough because the name on the document did not match the one on her driver's license. Back home, she went to fetch her marriage license to prove she had changed her name. Papers, please. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, this is going to happen nationwide if it goes through the Senate. Just realize this will also hurt trans people. Yeah, well, it's going to be illegal for them to vote soon anyway.